Dawn broke like a blade over the canyon. 8 spears formed a ring in the crimson mud, points steady, shoulders squared, eyes locked on the human at the riverbank. In the center of that circle, Lyra Vale crouched without flinching, her arms wrapped around something small and limp. Fur matted with blood. A cub's body, barely breathing. The lead hunter stepped forward, taller than Lyra by a head and a half, forearms thick with muscle, translator clicking as his growl sharpened into words. Step away from the cub, human. Lyra didn't move. She didn't reach for her plasma cutter. She only tightened her hold, like if she loosened her grip even a little, the cub would slip away faster. And when she finally spoke, her voice wasn't defiant. It was broken. His dying. They called themselves the Crin, apex hunters of this continent, clan-bound predators who measured trust by scars and loyalty by blood. Humans had been permitted on Crin Prime for diplomacy and research, but tolerated didn't mean accepted. Lyra had lived near the Den villages for 2 years, close enough to learn their trails, far enough that no one ever called her pack. Now, at the riverbank, the lead hunter's name pulsed through Lyra's translator, Raketh. Raketh had killed 3 raiders last moon cycle. He wore the proof in bone charms braided into his wrist wraps. His claw tips glinted in the sunrise. You killed Tovik, another hunter snarled, stepping in. Alpha's son. Spears pressed closer. The circle tightened, mud squelching under heavy feet. Lyra lifted her face, and the Crin flinched at what they saw. Not fear. Grief. Tears tracked down her cheeks, mixing with dirt and dried blood. Humans leaked when they felt too much. The Crin understood that much, even if they hated how it looked. I didn't do this, Lyra whispered. I found him. Raketha's nostril slits flared. He inhaled again, slow, careful. Young blood, yes. But there was something else. A bitter sting underneath it. Venom. Raketha's spear tip dipped a fraction. Razor wings, he said. The word landed heavy. Razor wings weren't warriors or raiders. They were worse, sky scavengers with hooked beaks and venom that turned a strong cub into a shaking, dying thing within hours. Lyra swallowed hard. She held up one hand, palm out, showing torn skin and puncture marks. These are from their beaks, she said. I fought them off. The hunters stared at her wounds. Defensive. Ugly. Real. Lyra shifted slightly, revealing the cub's torso. Deep gashes scored through fur and flesh. His breathing was shallow, wet, fragile, like each inhale might be his last. One hunter's voice dropped low. The venom is already in his blood. No one argued. They all knew what that meant. Even if they ran, even if the settlement was close, it was already too late. Raketha's translator crackled as his voice hardened again, trying to pull certainty back into the world. If you found him, he demanded, why bring him toward us? Lyra's throat bobbed. Because the human settlement was the opposite direction. Every hunter there knew it. Humans protected humans. That was the galaxy's rule. So why was this human kneeling in Crin mud, bleeding and shaking, guarding an alpha's dying son like he was her own? Lyra looked down at Tovik's half-lidded eyes, and her voice split on the answer. Because he's a child. Silence. A Crin child. Wasn't her species. Wasn't her clan. Wasn't even her responsibility. But Lyra spoke like responsibility had nothing to do with it. When I found him, she said, he was calling for his mother. Her lips trembled. He didn't understand why it hurt. He was scared. The spears didn't lower yet. But hands tightened less. The circle stopped shrinking. Tovik's eyes fluttered open for one drifting moment, just enough to focus on Lyra's face. Confusion. Pain. A question no dying cub should have to ask. Lyra leaned closer as if distance itself was cruel. I know, she whispered to him. I know, little one. And then she did something that made every Crin hunter freeze, like their bodies had forgotten how to move. Lyra bent her head and pressed her lips gently to the cub's forehead. A kiss. Human affection. Human farewell. The hunters stared as if she'd performed a ritual from a forbidden world. Lyra didn't look up. She stayed there a long moment. Tears fell into the cub's fur. Then she began to hum. Not words. A low, trembling melody that rose and fell like a hand stroking fear away. A lullaby. The canyon held its breath with him. Tovik's chest rose, then rose again, slower now. Softer. Less frantic. His small muscles unclenched. The terror in his eyes drained away, replaced by something almost peaceful, like whatever waited beyond pain had finally opened its arms. Lyra kept humming. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. Tovik exhaled. And this time, he didn't inhale again. For one heartbeat, Lyra stayed perfectly still, as if her body refused to accept that the world had changed. Then the sound that tore out of her was not human-polished grief. It was ancient. Raw. A keening wail that echoed off stone and water and sky, so primal it could have belonged to any mother of any species anywhere. She rocked in the mud, clutching the cub against her chest like she could keep him warm enough to undo death. The Crin hunters stared. Because they recognized that sound. They had heard it before. From their own. One spear fell. Not thrown. Dropped. Raketha's weapon slipped from his claws and hit the mud with a dull, heavy thud. Another followed. Then another. Until 8 spears lay abandoned in the crimson earth. 8 hunters stood with heads bowed, not as executioners, but as witnesses. Crin had protocols for death. Rites. Rituals. But there was something older than protocol. The recognition of a warrior who tried to save the young, and failed. Lyra wasn't Crin. She wasn't even a mother. But grief didn't care about species. In that moment, grief made her understandable. And understanding was the first step to belonging. Raketh approached slowly, claws retracted, posture softened. He knelt in the mud beside Lyra like you kneel beside a wounded clanmate. "Give him to me," he said quietly. "I will carry him home." Lyra's eyes were swollen, red, alien in their flatness, but the pain inside them translated perfectly. "I'm sorry," she choked. "I'm so sorry. I couldn't." Raketh interrupted, not harshly, but firmly, like correcting a lie that grief tried to tell. "You fought Razorwings. You carried him for hours. You gave him peace." He touched her shoulder with one heavy paw, gentle enough not to bruise. "In my clan," Raketh said, "this makes you Den Mother." The translator rendered the word wrong at first, then corrected itself, searching for meaning. Not mother. Not alpha. Something else. Someone who guards the den when it matters. Across the circle, other hunters rumbled low, agreement, respect. Lyra's hands trembled as she placed Tovik into Raketha's arms. The cub looked impossibly small against the hunter's broad chest. Lyra rose slowly, legs shaking, covered in mud and blood and tears. "I want to come," she said. "I need to tell his mother I tried." Raketh nodded once. She will want to meet the human who held her son as he died. Then he spoke in his own language, without the translator, words Lyra couldn't understand. But the tone said everything. Not accusation. Not suspicion. Something like honor. Something like gratitude. They began the walk back. Raketh carrying Tovik. Lyra walking beside them. Not dragged. Not surrounded like a prisoner. Surrounded like someone being brought home. As the sun lifted fully over the canyon, the riverbank turned gold, mud, blood, and water shining like the world itself was trying to be gentler. Behind them, 8 spears remained where they had fallen. A mark in the earth. A silent confession that something had changed. By nightfall, the story was already spreading between den villages. Not the story of a dead cub. Crin had endured loss before. but the story of the human who kissed a dying child's forehead. The human who sang fear away. The human who made alphas drop their spears. The human who proved that some instincts, love, grief, comfort, were older than language, older than species, older than stars. Lyra Vale had arrived on Crin Prime an outsider. She would not leave that way. Because the Crin did not adopt lightly. But when they did it forever. And somewhere in the dens that night, the first pups would hear a new word spoken with quiet reverence. Den Mother. If you enjoyed this HFY story, subscribe to Dragon Alien Universe for more epic sci-fi narratives. Like, comment, and turn on notifications.